Hi, everyone. I hope that you are all well. If you are here with us, can you drop us a little thumbs up or a yes, I see you and I hear you? I was still alive and I was about 15 minutes in before I realized nobody could see me, nobody could hear me. It's like the
I've
worst
been
mistake
there.
you can make. So, if you are here with us live, welcome. If you are watching on the replay, you can also just drop us a comment and let us know that you're watching on the replay. And if you're here with us live, you also get to tick off one of your bingo cards for today. So, thank you for being here. I am thrilled to be joined with Dr. Cindy Huffington from Curious Neuron and Wondergrade, who is going to be answering some of our questions that we have that have been posted in the group. And specifically, we're going to be talking about things related to emotions and regulation and that kind of aspect today. So if you're with us, you're also welcome to be dropping comments into the comment box as we go along. Before we get started, I did just want to do some of the admin. So we are on day 2 of the Toddler Play Conference, the 4th one, and it's been great to see all of you here. It's an amazing privilege for me to kind of see how you all interact with this information that is shared, how you all add to it and kind of share your experiences as well. So keep doing that. It's been great to see. And we have had talks today. My talk was today. We had a talk on visual perception by Heather from Growing Hands on Kids. We had a talk on shoes or for first walkers by Kaylee from the Movement Mama. We had 2 play workshops, one by Christina, who is from Toddler Approved, and one by Jamie Yunsi from Talk, Teach, Inspire. And I feel like I'm forgetting one more person. Am I? No, that's 5. And we have a great lineup for you as well tomorrow. So if you haven't, make sure that you go and watch all of today's talks. They are on there for 24 hours if you're on the free ticket, and then they expire. If you haven't already, also go and grab your swag bag. It's linked on the talks for today. Sometimes in these lives, we do a little bit of a play demonstration. We're not going to do that today because we've got some great questions to dive into. But if you are looking for some play inspiration, I did want to say that we have these play prompts, these spring play prompts for you to kind of go through little ideas like make a bird feeder or go for a picnic, just little play prompts to kind of inspire you in the spring season. And we also have a giveaway to give in the next 24 hours. Thank you to everyone that put your bingo cards out there for yesterday's giveaway that was from Hungry Cutters. Today we have a giveaway that is one person winning The Montessori Home by Ashley Yeh. She's one of our speakers that is speaking tomorrow. This is an awesome book. It's really like beautiful, full of pictures and I know you guys all love Ashley. So there's one person walking away with that. And then 3 people are going to be also walking away with the digital copy of a play magazine from my membership community. We have all kinds of different themes. So make sure to be popping your bingo cards in the thread for today and keep interacting in the group. And I think that that's about all of the admin that we need to cover. So if you are here and there's anything that I forgot, you can also let me know. Don't forget to come and say hello. Okay, I see that you guys are popping in here. Hi, Maria. And we are going to get started with some of the questions. So, Cindy, do you want to kick us off with maybe just introducing yourself a little bit? I think people probably knew you from yesterday as you were a speaker, but in case anyone hasn't met you, do you want to share a little bit more about what you do?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Cindy Huffington. I am the founder of Curious Neuron. This is something I began a couple years ago, coming out of my PhD in neuroscience and postdoctoral training in education. I became a parent and realized there was nothing really evidence-based out there. So I focus on emotional learning and emotional and mental health in kids, and try to cover all the science around that. And I'm also the co-founder of Wondergrade, which is an app for kids ages 3 to 8, and it helps them learn how to regulate their emotions. And I'm also the host of the Curious Neuron podcast. Thanks for having me, Holly.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Okay, so we have quite a few of you coming in here. We have someone saying that she loves your podcast and she's listening from Ecuador. So that's
Oh,
amazing.
that's so cool.
It is so cool. And I love it. It's like one of my favorite things, hearing where people are coming from and like just seeing sometimes some of the struggles that are unique and then a lot of the things that are not unique that like we all are experiencing.
It's
Uh,
true.
So, Cindy, we're going to pop off with one of the first questions that came in. This came in through the Facebook group, but if you're here with us live and you have a question to ask, you are more than welcome to pop that in the question box. So the question came in about social emotional programs for school, or to have as, like, I suppose, a school administrator or a teacher. And I know you have some answers here.
Yeah, it's funny because I just came off a talk with a counselor in the US who's in a school district in Connecticut. And I think there are quite a few programs. So if you Google CASEL, CASEL, that is the norm when it comes to social emotional learning in schools. And they have lots of studies, and they have their different categories in terms of what a child or which skills a child should learn. Now, this CASEL, I guess, foundation, there are also different programs that stem from this foundation and are companies and programs that are created that meet the standards of CASEL. So if anybody is looking for a program for their school for young kids, I do recommend that they first go on the CASEL website. They have the list of CASEL approved programs, some that I have had the chance of learning more about. There's the zones of regulation, which I believe is very common. I think that it's a very good start, but there are also lots of other ways that we can do this. Mark Brackett from Yale, I believe, the Yale Emotional Intelligence Center, he has a book called Permission to Feel, and he talks about the ruler approach. So in capitals, ruler, RULER. If you Google ruler and you look at some images, there are things that you could print out. And he talks about different quadrants. So you can be in the red zone, which is angry, but he doesn't just look at it as emotions and just labeling the emotions. In the red zone, you can be extremely excited. So if you think about before you give a presentation, you might be happy about it. You might be in that yellow zone. There's a lot of excitement around it. But that energy, you might be very high energy, and that for him falls in the red zone as well. So you're kind of mixed where you are. And I like that approach because it shows children that their emotions could be mixed a little bit. I know some schools here in Montreal that use this ruler approach in their schools. And when children walk in the morning, they place a little token on this quadrant that has red, yellow, blue, and green to show the teacher where they are today. How are they starting the school day? And I think when we could understand how regulated or dysregulated our students are, we can put more focus on which students might, if we have a couple students in the red zone, they're not going to learn similarly to those that are in the blue zone and are calm, or the yellow zone. So this ruler approach is another one that I recommend. And lastly, in the States, I don't know where it's available, if it's only in the States, but there's one called Second Step, and that has 3 puppets, I believe. And it's good until, I think, like preschool until grade 3, I believe, or even 4. And the puppets kind of have like different emotional situations. And then the teacher has like a guide in terms of what you would say and prompts that you would have for the student, and so on. So there's a few things out there that people can use in schools.
Amazing.
Oh yeah, and then I forgot also one thing that I'm trying to figure out is for younger kids, it is still very difficult to identify which zone you're in. So like which color zone, because the awareness still isn't there. And that's part of the work that I do through Wondergrade for very young kids, pre-K, kindergarten, and even grade 1, just having some sort of regulation tools, helping them identify when they're dysregulated and their system is off. And that is why I also would recommend for younger kids, the Wondergrade app, which is why we're trying to build this.
Amazing. That's it's great to hear these different approaches. Something that's come up a lot in the conference is this idea of like speaking about interoception, which is one of our senses. If anybody hasn't heard of that, tune in for day 3 and day 4. We cover that quite a lot. But one of the things that like really stood out, because we've used the ruler approach in like kind of correlation with, well, what was the first one? It's just slipped my head. The zones.
Yeah, the zones.
Like together with the zones in terms of like helping with colors and stuff. And for our family, like the excited emotion is probably the most difficult emotion. It's not necessarily angry or sad, because excited, it's like it's a good emotion, but it's also managing when that spins out, and like losing the control within that. So I was really interested to hear in the conversations about interoception, this idea that one of the first steps in terms of learning interoception, like learning what our body is actually experiencing, is first doing a check-in. So for
Yes.
example, when we only use those approaches in terms of the colors, in terms of labeling something, instead of doing the opposite where the child is actually doing the labeling, right? Like actually doing the step out, we kind of lose the step of understanding what the body is saying to you. Because like often a child that is, for example, hot and hasn't realized that they're hot, they may act really agitated, and we can label it as like you're in the red or whatever, which is an easy step to do, but actually it's that like bottom up kind of what's going on right now, like really learning yourself as well, in terms of like your holistic experience.
And I think that interoception piece is also very important for neurodivergent children, because they can't verbalize what they want to say. They're not going to verbalize, I'm excited, or I'm a red, or I'm a blue. They might not have that capacity, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that they don't have the ability to recognize emotions within themselves. There are different tones of voices. There are, body language that might change. There might be different, you might speak louder or lower depending on how you're feeling. And I think really looking inwards and helping that child recognize, like, you're right, my body gets hotter when I'm excited because my heart's pumping blood, right? Like having those sorts of conversations, or placing a hand on your heart and saying, wow, I feel it beating much faster now, like, or I'm breathing, beating faster, but also you could be breathing faster. But having all of these moments where you wait and take a moment to see how your body's reacting in that emotion. We don't have to label it right away, or we can do it retrospectively, like how did it feel in the moment? Like let's go back and think of 2 things you can measure on yourself. When you feel that things are different, place your hand on your heart. Is it beating more quickly? Are you breathing faster? Are you getting warm? Like, are your cheeks red? One of my sons, his cheeks get very red when he's excited. So just those are really important parts to all of this emotional learning.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I also like, it just reminds me of when we're walking through the process of toilet learning with children, that we don't try to prevent them from ever missing, because we actually want them to have an accident so that they experience it.
Yeah.
And similarly with the emotional piece, with all development, like we don't want them to never learn to fall when they're learning to walk. Like it has to go hand in hand. So I know it's easy for us to like want to just squelch down all of the experiences that can be really challenging to deal with. But sometimes it has to be experienced in order to be kind of learned or developed.
I think, Oh yeah, sorry. I think we do that naturally sometimes because we don't want our child to be in distress. And I always tell parents, like, it's, saying no, because setting that boundary, if your child wants a cookie before bedtime, that child getting really upset, sometimes it breaks their heart. Let's say they never ask for it and you're like, okay, you could give in that one time or whatever it is, but that consistency of holding a boundary is so important for their mental health, because it's that distress and knowing how it feels like to be super disappointed and or frustrated that you can't get what you want. And then we have to act as those emotional coaches. Like, I see that you're really upset right now. I still can't give you the cookie, but let's think about like what time we'll eat it tomorrow, or do you want 1 or 2 tomorrow? Which one do you want tomorrow, right? Like, kind of giving them those problem solving skills, or that looking forward, which is an emotion regulation skill. I can't have it in the moment, but let me look forward and try to think about how much I'll enjoy it tomorrow, right? Like, there is so much that we can do with our kids, but those moments of distress are important.
Absolutely. I think some of the stuff that you were saying in terms of the techniques lead really nicely into our next question. So I'll just read out the full question here. It said it was on underneath the clip from your video. And she said, you spoke a lot about underlying emotions and dysregulation causing behavior, along with different approaches to take, recognizing those and supporting the child through it. How can you apply those same concepts to a student that is nonverbal or has autism?
I love this question. And I think maybe I didn't talk a lot or enough about neurodivergent children. And that's often, we get focused on the neurotypical kids. But when it comes to neurodivergent children, there's a big part that has to do with us trying to understand them and how they regulate or dysregulate very specifically. We won't be able to recognize it as easily as a child who's verbal and might express it very differently. But there still are ways, as we were saying before, that child's cheeks might get red when they're really excited, or when they're really mad. They might have a different tone of voice, or a different it might be louder when they, even if they're not saying complete sentences or words that aren't completely understandable, they might have a different way of saying them. We have to really zone into them in that moment. And then we don't have to give them the words, but we could go through that moment with them after and say, I noticed that you were acting this way. I think you were feeling frustrated, just giving them the language in their minds of saying, I'm recognizing that when you're feeling this way, you act this way. It's going to be much harder because we're not, we might not see the little nuances that we might see in a neurotypical child, but they're still there. So there's still ways to say, well, my child keeps hitting, or keeps, let's say hitting. With a neurotypical, that child might also verbalize, I'm mad at you, or stop, I want my toy back. So it's easy to say, well, you're clearly frustrated, or you're clearly mad. The hitting on the neurotypical side, dysregulation doesn't come out as misbehavior all the time. Dysregulation of the system could come out as extreme excitement. So a child who's neurotypical might be hitting when they're very happy and very excited. So it just comes down to really looking at the environment, and the PDF that I offered parents does that. And you can do that with a typical, neurotypical, or neurodivergent child, is kind of stepping back and seeing what happened before that misbehavior happened, or that behavior that I'd like to work on with my child. And even though you can't see there is an underlying emotion, but it might be harder. And I don't want parents to automatically go towards the sort of more negative emotions. It might be excitement. And that's one thing that I wanted to make sure that we talk about, because it might be the other way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think like while you were talking, I was just thinking of Mona Delahook's book. There's a recent book on brain body parenting, but then there's also Beyond Behaviors. And sometimes we really put our own lens on what our children are experiencing. And this obviously, even for neurotypical children, this can often be very ineffective. Yeah. But with children that are neurodivergent, it's hard for us to sometimes, we presume that like any kind of sensory sensitivity is an immediate reaction, but it often isn't. It's often like a dysregulation that's been building up. And this is just like the overflow. I had a friend in university that we had this like experience that we always talk about whenever we meet up. We all talk about the thing because it's so life. She stubbed her toe, and then suddenly she cried for like an hour and a half because it had nothing to do with her toe, right? It had everything to do with everything else that was going on in her life. But this is often what we also see with our children, like this kind of like bubbling over, and we can like wrongly identify it in different ways and not necessarily see the whole picture. So we have to really be detectives as well, in the moment, but also in the big picture of understanding the things that are going on for our children.
Yeah, and really trying different techniques with those kids. I don't think there's a one size fits all when it comes to emotions. Even with my own 3 kids, we will have different approaches for each child, knowing if one is more sensitive towards the way that we have a tone. Let's say, I don't know if anybody watching or listening has a child, when you say no, or you raise your voice a little bit, they crumble. And then it breaks your heart because you're like, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't mean to do this, but you had to be firm in that moment. So, whether they're neurotypical or neurodivergent, I think we have to really listen to that child and see what their needs are and see what works best with them. The colors might not work for one child. I have also on my website Emotional Mountain, which is this visual of a mountain, because sometimes it helps to know there's like completely calm, and then there's completely dysregulated and crying, and you see an image of a child just like really upset. But in between there, sometimes if we could recognize it, then we could bring in some tools. And also, when a child is completely dysregulated and at the top of that mountain, there's nothing that we can do as parents. We have to just let that moment pass. And that's for all kids. So it's just really important that, we have visuals for kids and try different kinds of visuals. Even with my youngest, my 3-year-old, I had a light, like a green, yellow, and red light. And I was using that for the transition when I was ending TV time. And it really helped him in particular, not the other 2. So every child is so different.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to, there was one question that I just wanted to comment on from Kayla. And she said that we struggle with this a lot with families who have children with special needs or significant health needs, they have a hard time saying no or setting boundaries. And she specifically commented this, I think, on the section where we were talking about sometimes needing to allow that certain things actually happen or unfold, and not always trying to squelch down those difficult experiences. And I really relate to what she said in my own parenting journey, but also having worked with parents, that sometimes we are not always fully emotionally available or physically available to not be in the position where we need to squelch things down, right? Like an example, I had a mom once talk to me about her child having a tantrum in the middle of the road. This is a completely different situation to when you're at home and you're calm, and things can unfold a little bit differently. And so just really recognizing that in different families and in different settings, that we need to just be gracious with where the parent is at, where the child is at, and how the whole situation unfolds.
Yeah, and those public ones or public meltdowns or tantrums are extremely difficult for the parent. We get inside our head, that negative self-talk kicks in, that self-compassion leaves. It's really hard, but really being attuned to that child, and we sometimes we see it as misbehavior, but they need us right now. They're dysregulated and they need us. Coming back to the parents who struggle or don't set any boundaries, that's really hard, because I get it. They're struggling also with their child, or they might want to give them certain things, and I get that. I think we just have to be very mindful of explaining, there's some studies that show when you're a permissive parent, so you have lots of that warmth and sensitivity and no boundaries, that the child will struggle later on when there are boundaries and they don't have a choice. So I don't think a parent should always set the boundaries or have even more boundaries within their home, especially if they have a child with special needs. But having some boundaries that feel comfortable to you. Start where you are comfortable with it. Small boundaries that you feel okay with, because you might struggle, holding that boundary, but start with one that you are comfortable with, and then just support your child through that uncomfortableness, and just give them those tiny little moments, because that is a resilient building moment. So the smallest baby step that you can take will make a big difference, but not ignoring it and not having boundaries at all, but not also going to the other extreme of having lots of hard boundaries that are going to make it hard for your child, hard for you to parent. Just start with baby steps.
Absolutely. And just the same as we look at the children that we work with a really, with a lot of hope, and with such a positivity and a lot of grace in the way that we approach it. And I think sometimes we can also apply that to families, especially with young children that are really just figuring out new situations. Even in neurotypical families, the only constant is change. It's constantly evolving. And each step that, like you said, those resilient moments, I think is it's a great way to put our outlook on in terms of encouraging the parents as well. There was another question that came in, which is pretty much on quite a similar vein. I am wary of your time, Cindy. So there's 2 more questions, but if you need to go beforehand, just let me know.
We're okay.
Okay, so the question said, I would love to have more strategies in my toolbox on how to provide healthy ways for our non-speaking neurodivergent preschoolers to regulate and express their emotions in a safe way. So I think that you did actually cover this quite a lot, but is there anything that you wanted to add there?
No, I would really, I think with what we covered, it kind of answers that question in terms of creating visuals, trying to, again, they're not going to label. So I think of Mark Brackett's ruler approach that we just said, and they're not going to go through the recognizing and understanding and labeling, and that's okay. But it doesn't mean that we don't have to model it within our home, and it doesn't mean that we don't use the language at all, right? So I would recommend that a parent still use that, still validate the child's emotions and say, I can see that you're frustrated, or I can see you have a lot of energy now. And then kind of modeling. I remember with my second child, we have this sort of calm down corner with sensory toys there, and lots of different textures, and this bottle with glitter. And for my daughter, she didn't really need that. For my son, he needed a space, but he would never go to it. And I was like, okay, you're dysregulated. Go to your corner and go here in the calming area. And that wouldn't work. But what worked really well was when I would say, oh, I'm so frustrated right now. I'm going to go sit down. And I would play with the stuffed animal and play with the toys and look at the glitter bottle. And it took maybe 3-ish weeks. And then he started coming with me in my moments of dysregulation, and we sat together. And then it led to him kind of exploring it on his own and me coming with him to support him. So I think that there are ways that we can sort of find something that works for our child. Again, it has to do with exploring many different possibilities, many different options for our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel, whenever I'm interviewing, there's like a topic that will come up and I'll be like, oh, this could be another 45-minute discussion. Calm corners are definitely that, but I'm not going to get there.
Yeah, I know.
There's one more question that I want to put in here. So it's from a teacher. She says, I'm a 3-year-old preschool teacher in a private school. Some of my full-time students very much so miss their working parents. How can I partner with them without giving them the sense of working parent guilt, which would never be my intent, but I feel the need to be with the parents is their biggest struggle. I have 3 students that have struggled all year emotionally in missing their parents.
Oh, it's hard. My heart really goes out to the child, goes out to the parent, goes out to the teacher who has to figure out like how to do this. I think one of the biggest misconceptions we have is that when we're home, that we would have to spend like 3 hours with our child. I don't believe in that. I think there's a lot of independent play that can happen. However, I believe in moments of connection, and I'm looking at my journal that's to the right of me. And today, my intention for today, actually, weirdly enough, was to connect with my kids. I've been really busy the past couple of days with some work for Wondergrade, and I've noticed that the behavior is changing a little bit. They had a bit more screen time. So my intention today was to connect with my kids a little bit more. Before and after this talk, it's exactly what I'm doing. We're painting today. We're taking it a little bit slower. I would recommend that the teacher speaks to the parent and really says like, what can you do in 10 minutes? You have a card game. Here's a I don't know, a game that I recommend, or search and find, or something, or reading some books. Just making it a really small moment of 10 minutes a night to connect with your child, turning the phones off, putting them to the side, but really being intentional with that moment and connecting, truly disconnecting from the world to connect with your child. And I think that if we can do that and make it a small goal, such as 10 minutes, it's attainable for parents. And then you feel better in those moments, like maybe bedtime will be a little bit more smoother if you do take time to connect. But we don't need to have 3 hours of of playtime together, but a little bit of time does make a difference.
Yeah, I love that answer. I was just thinking as you were talking of how when I was working in preschools where we changed over seasons, we would send out little handouts about what kind of shoes to choose, in the change of season, things that would be most functional for the preschool and best for supporting their development. And sometimes little handouts like that, or however your school communicates, on just kind of making it okay that the slow and the connected time is really important for our children, because sometimes we can feel like we need to be doing more, like extracurriculars, extra this, extra that, doing all the fun right on the weekend, like filling up at our weekends with like really big experiences. But for this younger group, and especially if they are possibly children that are a little bit more sensitive, that they maybe would benefit more from like a slower pace. And teachers have this incredible window to supporting families. I think even small little drips that you can provide for your families and saying these things can walk that family through all of the next years that they're moving on to different teachers. Like, you're giving them incredibly powerful tools, even if they're small. And because you're an authority figure in the child's life and also to the parents, what you say, like if you give them that like permission to slow down and to, just be silly with each other, that can pay off so much. And also providing, if possible within your school, like some connection times, like having parents come in. Sometimes it doesn't work necessarily at drop off, especially if there's like some separation anxiety, but maybe like on a Friday afternoon, the parents, when they come to fetch, they can have 10 minutes to play within the preschool or something like that. So there's also that connection time for the parents. Okay, Cindy, do you have to go? There was one other short question, but if you have to go, that's totally fine.
I don't have to go, but I also saw a question I wanted to address. Somebody about the top of the mountain. I don't know if
that's it.
I really wanted to address that one, if that's okay with you.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
So somebody mentioned how when your child is at the top of the mountain and completely dysregulated, they can be crying or screaming or stomping, or It could be just a tantrum or a really big meltdown if it's a neurodivergent child. What do you do? Because that's really uncomfortable, and I get that. That is where, I'm going to say unfortunately, but not unfortunately, the work is on us, and that discomfort of a child showing those big emotions. And I know that it's on us because there's so much research that shows that the more regulated we can be, the more co-regulation that we can do, the calmer we are, then it's not that the child will automatically become calm after 2 minutes, but it helps us to kind of take in their emotions. So it's a lot of work. I've read a lot of books and even been to therapy after I had my third child. And I like sharing this because it doesn't matter if you know all the research on emotions. When you're in it as a parent, it's very different. So you don't, the information, sometimes like it doesn't help if you're not aware of what's happening in the moment. But I hadn't realized after 3 kids how dysregulated I became by the end of the day. There's that 4 p.m. I was home with 3 kids. I don't know why 4 p.m. seems to be like a universal thing for parents. But I was completely dysregulated by noise and sound and even touch, of always having a baby in my hands. I had 3 kids under 4 years. They were so small. And when they would have meltdowns, I noticed I could not handle any of these big emotions after 4 p.m. versus before. So that's how I know, like, it made a difference for me to work on how I was perceiving it, my inner talk, my self-compassion. At the end of the day, saying, when they're having these moments, you can't help them. You can be at their level. You can come down to the floor. Some kids want to be hugged, some don't, but just letting them know that you're there and validating their emotions. I know you're upset. I'm here when you need me. And then that moment becomes all the work on yourself. It's just like the self-compassion piece of, it's the end of the day. I really feel like yelling right now, but it's not about me. This moment is really not about me. They're just tired, or they're hungry, or I said no, and it was really difficult for them to take that. And it's okay. I didn't do anything wrong. Honestly, that's why on the Wondergrade app, we included something called the reset button. And it's like 1.5 minutes of my partner, my business partner, saying, this moment is not about you. It'll pass. It's just a moment. So that when we're having those moments, we could just put on our little headset and then listen to that and help us get through the moment of our child who might not even need us in that moment. So it's all about the inner talk. There's a book called Chatter by Dr. Ethan Cross. And he gives 25 evidence-based tips on how to deal with chatter. And one of them is using I, like, is it using I or your name? I'm forgetting now. Oh yeah, because when we're upset at each other, right, our inner talk becomes like, why are you thinking this? Or why didn't you do that? But when we say I, or we use our name, it's almost like we're talking to a friend, and the tone that we have for talking to ourselves changes. So really making sure that we kind of talk ourselves through this difficult moment that's for our child, but for ourselves as well. I don't know if that helps. But yeah, that's my advice.
I think that was perfect. Like, there's a lot of space for us to still be like normalizing that, like, kids experience things and they do it in very big ways,
Yes.
Especially depending on your temperament of your child. I think I just so relate to that, like, 4 p.m. thing with you. And also I know there's a lot of sensory stuff that we can do for ourselves as parents, because it is like incredibly more sensory stimulation that you'll ever experience in your life when you have young children, between the touch and the crying and all of that. So that's something that, apart from play, that's like my second big topic that I talk about. But I want to move on to one more question. Is that okay?
Yeah,
yes.
One more. Yeah.
Okay. So this is going to be the last question that we're going to take. And it is from Lisa, and she says, do you have any recommendations on how to help a partner learn about emotional regulation who has PTSD, and she wrote trauma at the bottom, and then she said mental health diagnosis. My son and him have real struggles during my son's emotional outbursts.
I'm just going to say, somebody asked for the name of the book. The name I just said was the book Chatter by Ethan Cross. That's the book I just mentioned. I think that's the one you're asking about. So yes, the problem or the struggle that Lisa is mentioning is a common one. And I often like to think about our system. So we have our nervous system that is impacted by our childhood. So if somebody underwent some trauma or had a childhood that was extremely dysregulated, loud, and stressful, then their system, I like to think of the colors, right? So Green is completely calm and regulated. Yellow is slightly dysregulated, and red is completely dysregulated. That's when you're at the level where anything like the shoe, the hitting your toe will send you off into crying or being really mad about something, and you almost can't even pinpoint like what just happened, like that's when your system is dysregulated. We're not automatically in green, in that green calm zone when we wake up. We're not automatically regulated because it's a new day. And in addition to that, if our childhood was very chaotic and didn't set us up for a regulated system, we might always be in the yellow zone. So something small throws us off from yellow to red rather than green to yellow, where we can still kind of think through, rational thinking of like, I shouldn't react this way. That's not what they meant to say. And that kind of thinking. So somebody who's experienced trauma snaps more easily because they're constantly on this level of slightly dysregulated nervous systems. It's hard to know how to approach this because every person will be different. If they're not receptive to having the talk about like how they're responding to their child and they're not seeing the impact. I know there are some parents, usually I hear from moms who are struggling with fathers who might be a little bit more aggressive when it comes to emotions or not allowing a child to express emotions. I would come from a place of curiosity and compassion first. It can help because sometimes we can easily, and I've done this myself, like pinpoint or point fingers, right? And saying, don't do it like this, do it like that. But trying to find ways that feel comfortable for your partner, trying to find, asking certain questions that would allow them to say like, okay, when there's this situation with our child, I know that's a trigger for you. Let me handle it. How can I help you in those moments of clear dysregulation? I don't want you to be in those moments because it's not conducive to healthy emotional learning for our child. And I know you want that same thing as I do. So how about you take certain situations in your hands and I take certain situations in my hands, trying to find a compromise, or not even a compromise, like ways to work together. Because when there is trauma, that is a very highly dysregulated system from the get-go. So just being aware of that and trying to support them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that answer. I think also this is something that I really relate to on a very personal level, but I think sometimes when we have children, it's kind of like a window of opportunity for us as well. There's so much stuff that we get to work through, and we are not the same people at day one of becoming a parent to day 100 to day 500. Like it's also a journey for us. So I would encourage you, Lisa, to also think about this as a window of opportunity for your husband. And then again, I would also say, like, we have to always put the best practice aside for a moment, and let's think about keep safe as like a need as well. So putting things in place that can help that as well, whether that is getting support specifically for him, for his diagnoses or mental health overall. Again, that being the window, but then also as the partner, knowing when there are situations that we need to be able to let them tap out, that we don't need to let them like go through something that maybe they aren't able to be in at that point. I know in our family, I really struggled when it came to night times because of I just like when my kids are like even like I didn't let my kids cry, I didn't let them fuss. Like I was like, I just need to like smother them and like love them, and it's the night and they're crying. And I needed my husband to take over in this point. This is something different, right? But there was something I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. I needed to like tap out of that responsibility and let him do it. And while emotions are part of every moment of life, it's not something that we can fully tap out of. There might be moments or pockets of time where we can, work out who's going to best serve this role or this time or this situation as well.
Yeah. Just to add to that as well, very quickly for Lisa, for her husband, sometimes people don't want to see a therapist and they don't want to start the work. Dr. Bruce Perry has two very important books, The Boy Who Was Raised by a Dog and What Happened to You. I would start with What Happened to You because it helps somebody understand how trauma impacts their system, their brain, their development, and their emotions. And maybe just having a little bit of insight around that as well, and starting that conversation of certain triggers and why There's that sort of, sometimes there's trauma because of abuse and sexual abuse. There's the aspect of touch. There's the aspect of, not feeling seen if you came from a verbally abusive, family. There's a lot that can happen. So if we can understand their triggers and they can understand their nervous system, it's a baby step towards making really big improvements.
Absolutely. And just one last little note is that I know we had questions coming through from like teachers and educators and therapists working with children with different kinds of health concerns and also special needs. And I just want to say that what we've just said here in terms of the aspect of trauma, especially when it comes to health concerns with children, that this can also be very, very relevant within families. The experience of trauma from having had, very life-threatening health situations with children. And that also then again feeds back into all of the things that you talked about discipline in the beginning. So just to like bear this in mind, and also I think take some of this content and like understand it in terms of people that are working with children perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that we're going to leave it at that, Cindy. We've gone over time, but I love this conversation. Thank you so much for being here. And I think I will come into the YouTube video and put a link for your website, so people can come and see more if this is the first time that they're meeting you. And you're welcome to also put anything there if you want to.
Thank you.
But thank you for everyone that's joining us here on the live or on the replay. And I think that will be it.
Thank you. And just for the Bruce Perry stuff, there was on the Facebook page yesterday after my talk, a lot of people were asking about his model of dysregulation and if they could have a visual. I'll send you the link, Holly, so that we can put it here as well. Overnight, my team and I wrote a blog post and have the images on the website now, and it's explained in a way that will help you understand your child a little bit more.
So that's amazing. Yeah. That was like, it's great to also hear as the person that, like, as content creators, the thing that people are actually wanting, because it kind of gives us a bit of direction.
I loved it. Yeah, I was like, sure, I'll get it done.
Well done, Cindy. Thank you. We have an amazing day coming up tomorrow. We have talks on independent play. We have talks on core strength, sensory processing, Montessori, and also we have a talk all about ball skills, which is going to be really fun. So we'll see you all tomorrow. Cindy, thanks again for being with us, and thanks for everyone that's joined us here. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.